This is AIM Agenda. With me, Liberal MP Tim Wilson and Labor Senator Anthony Chisholm. First of all, your reaction to the story, Senator Chisholm, in relation to the Labor tax hit. Are these numbers accurate?
Well, like most Australians, I don't take Scott Morrison too seriously, and I think your interview exposed that, where he said it was basically a dodged-up report from his office on top of some parliamentary budget work from last year. But what I saw when I saw that headline and the article in the paper was fairness, and that's what Bill Shorten's been talking about, and that's what Labor's absolutely committed to. Yeah,
what they're saying, I guess, and this will be Shorten's defence, that they're protecting middle and low-income earners, and those copping this tax hit are those that can afford it. That's the argument.
Well, if they're so convinced of that argument, then they won't have problems releasing their data and their reports from the Parliamentary Budget Office. But when you've got $100 billion that are going to be taken out of the hip pockets of average Aussies and taken into the Treasury's coffers under, if Bill Shorten's Prime Minister, they have the decent thing to do would be to release the data, release the report, so we can have an honest conversation about it.
One of the most potent arguments that the government's got, from my perspective, appears to be that when it relates to small to medium-sized businesses. It's fine to say, OK, big end of town, you miss out, but to say that you're going to remove that tax relief for those sorts of businesses, that won't be too popular, will it?
Well, I think when you look at the overall package that we're putting forward, it does favour those on lower incomes, and I think that's really important in the current environment. There's been a big debate around inequality, which Treasurer Morrison says doesn't exist.
What's the message on growth? How do you create growth?
Well, I think what we're doing, particularly for those under $87,000, is ensuring that they're going to have more money in the bank or to use to spend under Labor. And I think that's a real difference between us and the opposition, us and the government, who are focused on tax cuts for big business. And that's going to be a real discrepancy between us. This is the farce
of the argument. People who use trusts are small businesses and farmers. Big business don't use trusts. They actually have shareholders and they have they're publicly listed companies. It's small business and operators who are trying to manage issues around protecting assets as well as making sure they reduce their tax liability so they can keep their businesses alive, who are going to be hit and slugged hardest with Labor's $100 billion tax policy. And that's where if they, like opposition, were honest, if they're prepared to actually have a real discussion around how we should reform the tax system, they'd simply release the data from the Parliamentary Budget Office, and they haven't been prepared to do that. So despite what Anthony's just said, it's the fanciful nature of their arguments in hitting middle income and small businesses that are going to pay the price for Labor's policy.
And
Well, in relation to the trusts, it doesn't do anything to their assets and how they're protecting them. It actually goes to tax minimisation and making sure that we are able to crack down on that. And that's really important, and we're able to raise money from those people who are using trusts to avoid paying their fair share of tax.
This is something that's been raised.
Businesses and for farmers who are ones who are going to be hit by this. You're not attacking big business. This is just a farcical argument. Big businesses don't really use trust. It's small and medium businesses who are managing the situation they've faced.
And high wealth individuals. High wealth individuals.
There are some, but the reason that
income splitting.
There are some people who do use them for minimising their tax. No one would dispute.
Why not deal with that?
And well, that's part of the challenge. But the way you really deal with it is actually addressing tax. Tax policy? Why is it that people use trusts? It's because personal income tax rates are disproportionately higher than company tax rates. You even it out, and you'll actually address the problem. But Labor opposes any attempt.
The reality is,
but overall, it's about the equality debate, the fairness debate that you're trying to put versus the government's growth message.
Absolutely.
And the growth message is, well, for people to have jobs in the first place, you need a bit of growth, don't you?
Yeah, we don't see it from Treasurer Morrison. But in relation to tax avoidance, if Labor sees it, we'll go after it. And that's really the difference between the two sides, whereas they're arguing to protect it, inequality that is in the system, where if Labor sees it, we're going to pursue it.
Are you worried about the impact on it?
You just heard it. Yeah. Where Labor sees money, they grab it. That's the point. Tax avoidance. Seize it. And that is the fundamental problem with the policy they've brought forward, is they're going to smash small and medium businesses and people who are working for themselves. And the people who will be protected from this policy will actually be big businesses.
Ideas raised by Liberal treasurers have raised this before, though.
They have raised it before, but the impact of this policy right now will be to hit people who are standing on their own 2 feet and small and medium businesses. Big businesses won't be affected despite their postulating.
Let's move on. Archbishop Fisher of Sydney's Archdiocese concerned about the impact of a yes vote on same-sex marriage for church-related organisations like schools, hospitals, welfare organisations. What's your response to the Archbishop this morning?
Well, respectfully, it's not accurate. I mean, here's a copy of the Australian Constitution. If you go to section 116, the Commonwealth shall not make any law for establishing any religion or for imposing any religious observance or prohibiting the free exercise of any religion, and no religious test shall be required as a qualification for any office of public trusts and under the Commonwealth. Respectfully, it's an inaccurate argument. It's used designed to feed a no campaign. I'm going to send a copy to the Archbishop so that he has a copy and knows that we can't legally do what he is claiming could happen. This issue in the end is actually about whether we change the law to bring same-sex couples and treat them equally under the law as heterosexual couples. What we should do is deal with the issue, move on as a country and express and celebrate the freedom of everybody.
So under that section of the Constitution, the groups like the welfare agencies that counsel couples and so on, they won't be required if it's against their religious belief to provide services to same-sex couples. Is that right?
Well, no.
That's what he's arguing, isn't it?
What he's arguing is that there'll be some sort of encroachment where agencies will be forced to do things against their faith-based practice. Section 116 protects that. As Simon Birmingham has rightly outlined, under the current Sex Discrimination Act, there are protections against that, against those types of activities under both federal and state law. So, respectfully, the argument is based on a falsehood.
Yeah, I think essentially Tim's correct on this. And I certainly know that the bill that was before, well, potentially before the Parliament, that was drafted by Dean Smith, certainly went through the parliamentary committee stage that had exemptions for, in terms of civil celebrants, so forth. So certainly what was before the Parliament, potentially before the Parliament, would have had exemptions in that regard.
And in relation to the broader debate, is this the core of the debate, do you think? Is this the bottom line when you've got the no campaign going to religious freedom, the yes campaign saying this is civil rights, basically equality?
Well, look, I think that they will try and do all sorts of things to try and muddy the waters, but I think for many people this is actually about ending discrimination when it comes to marriage. That's what it is for me, and I look forward to voting yes and advocating for yes.
Are you encouraged by the enrolments with the Electoral Commission?
Well,
it looks like there's been a surge in enrolments. That should be positive for the numbers for the yes case, given that most of them are young people.
Well, what I've said consistently is I want people to participate. So more people enrolling is a good sign that young people want to participate and have their say in this vote. We know they disproportionately favour the yes case. I mean, my view has always been we deal with this issue as quickly as possible. We move the country on so that we can focus on the issues that affect every Australian around electricity prices, dealing with the budget and moving Australia on as a nation.
Gentlemen, thank you.